Aloha. My name is Cedric Duarte with the Kalaimoku Group. The following is an overview of some of the more significant events related to the development of Turtle Bay Resort. It's not intended to be comprehensive, and in the interest of time, many details may have been summarized or omitted altogether. Conducting this presentation is Randall Sakumoto with the law firm of McCorriston Miller Mukai MacKinnon. He has worked with the various owners of Turtle Bay Resort for over 20 years.
To understand where things stand now, it's important to look at the history of the property even before the existing hotel was built. Until the late 1960s, the property had been owned by Campbell Estate and leased to Alexander and Baldwin. A portion of the property was used for sugar production, and a portion on the east side was used as a military airfield. However, Campbell Estate and A&B eventually realized that using the property for sugar production was no longer viable. Around that same time, tourism had been identified as an industry with significant long-term economic and employment potential. Thus, Campbell Estate signed an agreement with a company called Inscon, which was a joint venture between Del E. Webb Corporation and PIC Realty. PIC was part of Prudential Insurance Company. That agreement called for the construction of a 500-room hotel, 368 townhouse-type condominium units, and an 18-hole golf course. Construction was completed in 1972, and Del E. Webb Corporation became the hotel's first manager. In 1976, Prudential formed Kuilima Development Company and bought out the interest of Del E. Webb Corporation. Kuilima Development Company then hired Hyatt Corporation as the manager of the hotel. In 1977, the Oahu General Plan was adopted, identifying Kuilima as a growth area for the resort industry. In 1983, hotel management changed again to the Hilton Hotel Corporation, and the name of the hotel was changed from Kuilima Resort to Turtle Bay Resort. In 1985, the city adopted the Ko'olauloa Development Plan Land Use Amendment, which contemplated a 3,500-unit expansion at the resort. That same year, Kuilima Development Company prepared an environmental impact statement to assess the anticipated environmental impacts of such an expansion. In 1986, the State Land Use Commission approved a change in the land use classification to the urban district. And later that same year, the Honolulu City Council approved a zone change, SMA use permit, and shoreline setback variance for the development of a master planned resort. As part of that approval, Kuilima Development Company and Campbell Estate, which still owned the fee interest, signed and recorded a document known as the Unilateral Agreement, sometimes simply referred to as the UA. Exhibit 2 to the UA identifies the various development sites contemplated at the time the UA was approved, including the number of units allowed per development site. The table in the upper left corner of Exhibit 2 allocates 4,000 units amongst the development sites designated H1 through H4 and A1 through A7. The 4,000 units included the 487 units in the existing hotel. The above designations, such as H1 and H2, were used by the resort owner in 1986 and for several years thereafter. However, these older designations should not be confused with the current designations, as explained later in this presentation. In 1988, a Japanese company called Asahi Juken formed a company called Kuilima Resort Company and acquired the resort from Kuilima Development Company. However, shortly thereafter, a recession began in the US and the Japanese bubble economy burst, resulting in an economic downturn that would last about 10 years. In 1998, Kuilima Resort Company acquired the leased fee interest in the resort from Campbell Estate. Then a local developer and Oaktree acquired the partnership interest in Kuilima Resort Company and thereby became the owners of the resort. However, a dispute between the developer and Oaktree arose. This dispute eventually resolved around 2001, with Oaktree gaining full control over the property. In 2005, Kuilima Resort Company submitted a bulk lot subdivision application to the DPP. Unite Here Local 5 challenged DPP's acceptance of that application, asserting that DPP should not have done so until a supplemental EIS, which updated the 1985 EIS, was first processed and accepted. DPP disagreed, and in 2006, litigation was commenced by Local 5, Keep the North Shore Country, and the Sierra Club. This litigation would last until 2010, going through the Circuit Court, the Intermediate Court of Appeals, and finally the Hawaii Supreme Court. In 2008, Governor Linda Lingle, in her State of the State address, proposed that the state buy Turtle Bay Resort. Governor Lingle would leave office in 2010. However, her successor, Governor Neil Abercrombie, established a working group for the state to consider purchasing a conservation easement at the resort. After 5 years of litigation, the Hawaii Supreme Court issued a decision in 2010 that a supplemental EIS should have been required by DPP. Consequently, in November 2012, then resort owner Turtle Bay Resort LLC published a draft supplemental EIS. And in October 2013, the DPP accepted that supplemental EIS. However, soon thereafter, complaints were filed by Keep the North Shore Country, the Sierra Club, and Unite Here Local 5, challenging the DPP's acceptance. In 2010, Turtle Bay Resort LLC acquired the resort from Kuilima Resort Company and hired Replay Resorts to serve as its asset manager. In 2013, a conservation easement working group was established and submitted a report to then Governor Neil Abercrombie for the acquisition of a conservation easement over portions of the undeveloped lands at Turtle Bay Resort. Later that year, Bill 47, 2013, which is a revised Ko'olauloa Sustainable Communities Plan, passes first reading. In 2014, the state legislature passed Act 81, which authorized the financing for the state's acquisition of a conservation easement. Later that same year, the State Board of Land and Natural Resources held a public meeting and approved the exploration of a conservation easement. Governor Abercrombie would leave office in 2014, but by that time, the basic terms of a conservation easement transaction had already taken shape. Shortly after Governor David Ige took office, he instructed members of his administration to continue to pursue the acquisition of the conservation easement. In 2015, the state legislature passed Senate Bill 284 to authorize funding for this acquisition. And later that year, the State Board of Land and Natural Resources met to approve the acquisition of the conservation easement, as well as the purchase of the fee interest in lands at Kawela Bay. Additional funding was still needed to close the deal, and that was provided by the city's agreement to purchase the fee interest in a parcel of land at Kawela Bay, and by the Trust for Public Lands securing funds through the Army Compatible Use Buffer Program. The BLNR meeting, where the conservation easement transaction was finally approved, was held on September 25, 2015. This is an excerpt of the report prepared by DLNR staff. The report explains that the conservation easement will cover approximately 568 acres of land at the resort, shown in green in the map on the right. The report also explains that the 29-acre site, known as RR4 or Lot 19, would be excluded from the coverage of the conservation easement, but that the state would acquire an option to purchase a conservation easement over RR4 should additional funds become available. The report goes on to explain that lots 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, and 27 would also be excluded from the conservation easement and would remain available for future hotel and residential development. In 2015, the conservation easement transaction was consummated. The combination of this new conservation easement area and the lands acquired in fee simple by the state and the city as part of that same transaction would result in the resort owner foregoing the opportunity to develop over 620 acres of land. Additional benefits of this 2015 transaction included establishing meaningful public access trails throughout the resort campus, establishing meaningful public parking at all times, establishing golfing privileges for the Kahuku High School golf team, and still maintaining the ability to develop certain portions of the resort campus. The state of Hawaii was also given an option to purchase a conservation easement over the RR4 site. The state did not exercise that right, and the option expired in 2017. As part of the 2015 transactions, the supplemental EIS lawsuits filed in 2013 were settled. The settlement with Keep the North Shore Country and the Sierra Club covered sites H1, H2, and RR3. The key points to that settlement may be summarized as follows. The total number of units on H1, H2, and RR3 may not exceed 725. Provided the total number of units on H1, H2, and RR3 does not exceed 725, Keep the North Shore Country and the Sierra Club agreed not to oppose development of these sites. Keep the North Shore Country and/or Trust for Public Land were given an option to acquire a conservation easement over RR3. That option expired in December of 2017. No construction could begin on RR3 prior to December 31, 2017. Keep the North Shore Country also received $35,000 as reimbursement for its legal fees, and North Shore Community Land Trust received $200,000 for conservation efforts. At the same time, a settlement was reached with Keep the North Shore Country and the Sierra Club. A separate settlement was also reached with Unite Here Local 5. That settlement applied only to sites H1 and H2 and required that the units developed on these two sites provide specified levels of hotel services, with the goal of creating greater employment opportunities. Provided the development of H1 and H2 complied with this obligation, Local 5 likewise agreed not to interfere with or oppose the development of these two sites. The impact of the 2015 transactions was profound, as there was a sudden and dramatic reduction in the potential development at Turtle Bay. This slide shows the comparison of the development potential between 1986, when the UA and the SMA use permit were first approved, allowing more than 3,500 additional units to be built, and 2015, when the conservation easement transaction was closed, restricting development on H1, H2, and RR3 to just 725 units. RR4 was not covered by the conservation easement or any of the settlements. However, the state was given an option to purchase an additional conservation easement. BRE Turtle Bay Resort, LLC, acquired the resort from Turtle Bay Resort, LLC in 2017. Then, for the next several years, the Honolulu City Council made multiple attempts to adopt a revised version of the Ko'olauloa Sustainable Communities Plan. These bills kept dying and getting reintroduced until finally, in 2020, the bill passed first and second reading. In January 2021, the Honolulu City Council unanimously adopted Bill 79, 2020, which approved the new Ko'olauloa Sustainable Communities Plan. This document reflected the city's recognition of, among other things, the development rights under the 1986 Unilateral Agreement and 1986 SMA Use Permit, but also acknowledged the 2015 settlement agreements with Keep the North Shore Country and the Sierra Club, noting that development on sites H1, H2, and RR3 should be limited to a total of 725 units. The city affirmed that plans to expand the resort should be maintained, as resort expansion within the context of existing land use approvals will provide a major source of jobs. To conclude our chronology, in April 2024, 3 parcels within the resort were acquired by affiliates of Arte Collective. Then, in July 2024, the remainder of the resort was acquired by affiliates of Host Hotels and Resorts. This final map reflects a number of events which we just covered, including the conservation easement area in green, the parcels purchased by the state in light blue, the parcel purchased by the city in purple, and the development sites currently owned by Host and Arte.
Mahalo for taking time to watch this presentation. For more information, please visit turtlebayresortdevelopment.com.